Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my channel simply is Discerning What is True. Tonight, I'm going to be reading from the book Revelations of the Holy Spirit, decoded by Phil Langdon. The particular chapter I'm going to go through tonight is chapter 20, simply called 1,000 Years. And this is the particular card that is that Phil Langdon has shared with what we call the um, Rider-Waite Tarot cards, which is about judgment. And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss and holding in his hand a great chain. Verse 2, he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Verse 3, he threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed it over him to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time. So there are 6 mentions of the term 1,000 years here in the first 7 verses of chapter 20, including the title of the chapter, that is giving 1 and 6 mentions of the conqueror number, that is relating again to the 7 breaths, meaning spirits, of God, end quote, and the completion of the natural kingdoms. And the natural kingdoms is actually revealed in the book by author M. Young here, The Reflexive Universe, and it is part induced by some of the things that Phil shares. It actually comes from author M. Young in his book here. So the angel coming down out of heaven, that is in quotes, is the Logos, who has the keys to death and Hades, the abyss, and he holds a great chain of archons, that is kingdoms, and behind him was Satan, the creator, at the other end. As the Omega, the Son of God has authority over the Alpha Devil, that is, the automatic creator of the primordial substance, and binds him for the period between the 6th and final incarnation for 1,000 years. Reckoned as 10 times an idealized human lifespan, just before the devil comes out once more as the final incarnation of the soul, before total defeat of the lower nature is achieved. According to this text, the making of an angel, in other words, is, quote, reigning for 1,000 years, is not literal. Then since in heaven time does not pass. Verse 4, I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given authority to judge, and I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony for Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received the mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Verse 6, blessed and holy are those who have part in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him for 1,000 years. So when he's talking about here, something blessed and holy are those who have part in the first resurrection. The second death has no power on them because they've actually already died. They've already died within themselves, you see. And so with that, they've had the ascension moment taking place in their lives. And with that, meaning simply is the second death has no power over them because they are no longer bound to this planet. And it says they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him 1,000 years. In a vision beyond life here, as Phil goes on, in the judgment of death, John sees the thrones of his higher self after each of the previous incarnations, each one to judge over their past deeds, that is, thoughts, emotions, and actions of the lower self, that is, the incarnated self, the flesh. The higher self naturally resides in bliss with God, you see, which is part of the bliss which Phil has shared personally with me, but also he's shared with others. in full knowledge of the Son of God, and does not receive the mark of the beast. That is, the mark of the beast is physical nature. In other words, they have conquered the nature within themselves. So being beheaded is a figure of speech, you see, for the separation of the spiritual level from the physical. So we could compare that with simply to do with the capstone of the pyramid, the upper part, you see, of the head. You follow? If you see a pyramid, and people say, I've noticed that someone said there's no capstone with the pyramids in, quote unquote, in Egypt. I don't know if it's true or not, but the point is a good point here simply is the capstone is your head. If it's not there, meaning that it's actually ascended. You see, this is, again, in a way, not literally, but reality simply is that they found God within themselves. So John the Baptist was beheaded in his story, but since the head is where ascension occurs, separating us spiritually from the rest of our physical nature, correct. We can see the allegorical reference to, quote, beheading, in this sense, telling us about the spiritual level of the scene. It is also a Buddhist practice to remove the heads of any statue in a temple. I'll say that again. It is also a Buddhist practice to remove the heads of any statues in a temple if it was going to be overrun by invaders, because the, quote, spiritual power is to be in the head of the statue. Quote, all the pure and noble thoughts, sentiments, aspirations, and memories are retained and remain in the deathless mind, nous, throughout the season of subjective peace and bliss, which the soul then experiences. But all the worthless and evil elements are rejected and left to remain dormant in the lower psychic region, or realm, I should say, dying the second death and coming to life. So this, when you do this, you're dying the second death, you see. Where are we at here? And coming to life only when the soul again descends into the sphere of generation. Thus, the man's own past is his personal Satan or devil, the ancient serpent trailing through the ages and accusing him day and night before the inner God, who is his righteous judge, end quote. That is from the Apocalypse Unsealed by page 205 by James M. Price. So James M. Price is elaborating on this particular purpose. What he's elaborating is saying, again, all the pure and noble thoughts, sentiments, aspirations, and memories are retained and remain in the deathless mind, the nous, throughout the season of subjective peace and bliss, which the soul then experiences. But all the worthless and evil elements are rejected and left to remain dormant in the lower psyche realm. That is dying the second death and coming to life only when the soul again descends into the sphere of generation. Then the man's own past is his personal Satan and devil, the ancient serpent trailing through the ages and accusing him day and night before his inner God, who is his righteous judge. So verse 7, when the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison. Verse 8, and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth. That is God and Magog, to gather them for battle in number. They are like the sand on the seashore. Quote, next one is simply, quote, they march across the breadth of the earth and surround the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. So when the last incarnation comes, after the idealized 1,000 years between lives, the devil's burdens once again be taken up, and they number more than the grains of, quote, sands of the seashore, end quote. Life is full of seemingly burdens at first until we realize opportunities when we see them. God and Magog refers to land. That is, refers to land meaning Magog, that is, and its owner, God. So Satan, the opposer, the opposite of God's purely spiritual nature, is the owner of two domains. That is the abyss and the cosmos. The letter G, Gamel, in the expression, quote, God, is the third letter letter in Hebrew, pertaining to repayment and justice. Highly appropriately consider the nature of the light as great judge as it is dwelling place where they did go, that is, and from where they are reborn into physical life. And so he gives an illustration here, as he often does. And this is very key here for you to see as a separation here. And you can see this clearly. So I show this to you right now, this part here. You see, there are upper rooms here, and Phil has shown us what they're revealing. So when you look at this, what he's saying is that the very top, which is where your head is, the most important, is spiritual. And then the God here is represented by the Yaldabaoth, or the merge, whichever you want to talk about, the creator. Then there's a separation, what we call the Magod, you see, on the right side. And that would be the abyss and cosmos. Okay? I hope you see that, so you can see that quickly. If not, just download the book. Phil Langdon offers this for free. He doesn't charge you anything for that at all. Let's continue. So the very high part, again, is the spiritual, which is heaven. Then you have the abyss and cosmos, or the Magod and the God, you see. The church, many times in a physical way they look at it, they see God and Magod have to do with a physical countries. Okay. We won't go into that right now, but it's just what I share with that part of it. Here's foretold the fate of the dragon, the epithumeric principle, whose host of desires, passions, and longings is indeed as the sand of the sea, but they have now no lodging place, you see, in the purified nature of the conqueror. They have nowhere to stay, you see. And is this only as the surviving impressions and impulses impresses like phonograph records on the plastic world / soul as a malignant composite, especially a spectral entity that assailed him from without. The purifying fire liberates these collective phantoms and their focal center. The dragon is his capacity as the, quote, 8 shares the doom of the bogus lion and the bogus lamb. This is again from Apocalypse Unsealed, I should say, page 206. James M. Price, again, Pryse. If you want to download that book, you can read this book actually on archive.org. It's there. You can read it. The book that Phil goes to from James M. Price. Let's continue. Quote, tormented day and night is a nod to the first day, that is dos, of creation again, the first kingdom state of the timeless abyss and its light. Physical nature begins and ends with it. Thus, no evil, that is ignorance, okay, can withstand or survive its truth and would be tormented day and night if it could withstand. Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it, earth and sky, that is, fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the devil, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. So what I'm showing here now is I'm going to go back in here and show you this whole. This is very key for you to understand. This is what Phil Langdon saw within his own ascension, within his own head. This is the description of what he shows here. Okay. And it, he said something in space when he saw this, it kind of freaked him out at first. Well, but this is actually revealing what takes place within your head. This is the ascension moment here, part of it. It's one part of it. There are 2 keys here, and this is the first key. So let's continue on here. Verse 13, the sea gave up the dead they were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what he had done. Verse 14, then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. Verse 15, if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So let's continue what Phil elaborates on this. So earth and sky fled from his presence, that is. In other words, wing, as every mountain and island was removed from his place. And how we come to the great white throne of the Lamb, that is earth, which meaning all that is physical, sky, pertaining to the sky of the head from which we ascend. Everything takes place in your head. This is the temple of God, you see, within you. So the books were open. Portrays our status at the end of incarnations, like John at the end of his. We must account for all previous incarnations, quote, the dead, great, and small, and those given up by, quote, the sea and by death and Hades, end quote, so that all previous lives are accounted for and filtered for purification. All unwanted elements of John's past character, that is, quote, anyone named not found, end quote, are consumed by chaos in the second death, end quote. Even death and Hades have no grip on the conqueror and are not needed, since his automatic incarnations are at an end. So what he's explaining here, the last part here simply is once you have this ascension, you no longer are involved with what we call the reincarnation wheel. You see, you don't come back here unless you choose to come back here, but you've made heaven within yourself. Okay, it's not out there. You're getting it. You're actually doing this for yourself. If anything, it is a part of you're actually discovering who you really are. You see, in this whole ascension deal. So I won't go into too much more on that. That's what I was reading from is chapter 20. Tonight, we will probably do chapter 21 and 22. I don't know if I'll do it tonight. These are very short chapters here. We may go back into that. We may not. It depends here. So it's a very short chapter. Again, I would suggest simply if you would like to know more, look into the videos I've had with Phil Langdon. There have been live videos. I've met him. I met him last year, roughly in August or September or something like that. So I've done probably 10 to 15 videos with him live. They're all on my Discerning What Is True channel. Phil Langdon's also used they're on his channel, also on his YouTube channel. So you're more than welcome to do that. The whole key here simply is to see the truth and discover the real you see. Okay. All right. Have a good night and take care.